Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here, Canadian Looney. How y'all doing? Can you believe it's already October 1st? It's a funny thing about time. It messes with you. It goes by more quickly, it seems, but that isn't intuitive with the math on that. Just a funny one. Anyhow, we've got a great show. We're going to do our intro because that gets us pumped up. Then we're going to jump into a committee meeting for about a half hour. That's a super interesting piece. It's about the Russian misinformation being spread about you. It's an interesting piece to watch for sure. That's taking place right now. So let's get into this, guys.
I don't want to be negative, but I don't think anything's ever going to get better ever again.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Wiggle and squirm as you might, it is really hard to put lipstick on a pig.
When I'm Prime Minister, I will keep my promises. WTF. Here.
I know this place is where I am. No other place is better than. No matter where I go, I am proud to be Canadian. I am, you know I am. The world that works. You know I am. I am Canadian. Come on! I love this country where I am. This land is where I make my stand. The mother truth is truer than
The one we call Canadian. Canadians.
Gentlemen, beam me aboard.
So all right, gang, we're gonna drop into a committee video right away. This one is interesting. We're gonna watch this for about 35 minutes or 30 minutes, something like that. I wanna say hello to everybody that we see in the chat early on. Happy shout out. October 1st, weird thing about time, man. October already. Can't wait for the next election. Backyard Garden, good to see you, always a pleasure. My man, Brent Parsons. Guys, check out Brent's channel. He's doing a bang-up job on his videos. Like, subscribe his channel when you go there. Brent's an entertaining guy, learning how to do this stuff. Common Sense, good to see you. We've got a great show. Janet Nunn, always a pleasure. My man, Captain Kirk, beam us up. Life used to be good. Hopefully we can get it back on track. Life used to be good. Like, that's why we're paying attention. My man, Mike Tremblay, how you doing? Good to see you. Always a pleasure. Savage Silence. I do love your handle, man. That's great. Sheila Hall, my girl, what's up? Got a crush on you. Tracy Smith, welcome to the chat. We have a great time here every day, and that's going to take place here today too. We're going to jump into this committee video again for about 30 minutes. It's an interesting piece, I think, and then we're going to cross over to the House of Commons question period. So welcome aboard, everybody. Thank you for tuning in here. Again, I'm Aaron Looney. Like, subscribe, share, get notified, all those fun things. We cover Canadian federal politics. I'm learning about Canadian federal politics. I don't know all about this, but the things that I'm learning, I like to share with the audience. We're trying to incorporate more live videos, interviewing or chatting with other Canadians that are similar to myself that realize a change is necessary in our country, a different direction maybe. Anyhow, Alette, great to see you. Good to see you, Alette. It's been a while. It's been too long. Like I say, just really glad to see you. Rita D'Alessandro, what is up, girl? How are you doing today? I see Donna Logan jumped in the room. Harry Taint, my man, what is going on? Christine Noseworthy, it's always a pleasure to have you here in the chat room. I'm hoping that we'll see, oh, my man True Blue, another one of my buddies showing up. Thanks for coming, man. Mike Malash, what is up? Sorry, everybody's popping in at once. Anyways, it's fun to see the crowd gather. Hope I'm not missing anybody. If I missed anybody, don't take it personally. But also, check out Brent Parsons' channel after this show. Check him out. Brent's stuff is getting better, and he's definitely entertaining to watch. Anyways, we're going to get into this committee video that is pretty frigging interesting. So let's jump into that.
Chi to give an opening statement of up to 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. The Ukrainian-Canadian community has been the target of Soviet and now Russian disinformation for many decades. What many Canadians have difficulty understanding that this is not a case of homeland against diaspora. Our Ukrainian government is not targeting us. It's a foreign government, the Russian government, that has made us the object of their disinformation. And as my friends have alluded, CSIS has identified Russia as a foreign actor and player in disinformation. To quote from their report, Russia also continues.
What's up, Mark Weber? Welcome to the chat.
Falsely claiming that it is composed of neo-fascists who control Canada's foreign policy. And there's more that they say, but I'm sure you've read the report. So when our intelligence service comes to these conclusions, why is Canada still a safe haven for Russian operatives? One of the reasons is that some Canadian politicians, foreign policy advisors, and staff in global affairs hold a naive view of Russia and the threat that it poses to Canada and our democratic institutions. For over a decade, our community advocated for the ban on RT, Russia television, but that didn't happen until a full year after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. RT was finally sanctioned by Canada, along with other Russian institutions, such as Putin's think tank, the Valdai Club. But no action has been taken by the government with regard to those in Canada who collaborate with these institutions. There are many Canadian contributors to RT who are allowed to operate with impunity. Indeed, some of them are invited to appear before Canadian parliamentary committees. Others are given grants from Canadian taxpayer money to produce Russian propaganda films. We also know that Canada is a preferred destination for Russian sleeper agents because there doesn't appear to be any detection or prevention of foreign espionage in Canada. They come here because we make it easy for them to establish their identities, all the while carrying on their spycraft. They then move to other allied countries, posing as citizens of a reliable allied partner. They're now Canadians. You know the story of the Vavilov family and, of course, Mikhail Mitushkin, who was recently exchanged in the Evan Gershkowitz exchange. He was a colonel in Russian military intelligence, a valued asset of Putin's. So Russia
Thank you, Mike Tremblay. You're the best. That's awesome. Appreciate it.
Academics, journalists, social media influencers who Stalin called useful idiots to repeat and amplify their narratives. And when these narratives are word for word what the Russian embassy and Putin are saying, why does no one ask why? We know that we're here to discuss the RT-run Tenet or doppelganger operation involving a Canadian company owned by two Canadians using Canadian social influencers. They produce Canadian-themed videos on hot-button divisive issues, and once they have the ear of a frightened and disaffected audience, they blame the economy and everything else that is wrong in the world on Canadian support for Ukraine, who are all Nazis, by the way.
Hey, Julie Mack, what is up? How are you today? Marie Perrin, how are you doing? Good to see you. Broken Prophet, what is up?
Nazis. And this has
Welcome,
also posed
everybody.
a threat to our community, unfortunately. We surveyed our community and we saw a substantial increase in the number of anti-Ukrainian hate-motivated incidents. We have asked 2 successive ministers of public safety to speak out and condemn this behavior, but they remain silent. We know that for decades, the Soviet Union engaged in active measures, operations to discredit our post-World War II diaspora, who were very critical of the Soviet regime, and we posed a threat to them. One of these operations, unfortunately, was the Deschênes Commission. Evidence in Operation Payback shows that the campaign to inflame the Canadian public by falsely claiming that the infamous Dr. Mengele was hiding in Canada. This was a campaign that was started by a Canadian representative of the Simon Wiesenthal, Saul Littman, who deliberately planted false stories. And once the Canadian public was sufficiently inflamed, the Mulroney government convened a commission of inquiry, which cleared all but 29 individuals. And yet today, we hear repeated calls for the disclosure of the names of these innocent people. Over 800 of them who have several generations of descendants.
I'm sorry, could I get you to wrap up?
Yes. So we also would like to speak to the Russian propaganda film, Russians at War, which was produced by a former producer of Russian television, an example of the kind of naivete that we have in Canada, which not only condones but finances the whitewashing of genocide. So I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank the witnesses for being here and for participating in this important study. Oh, so they automatically turned it on. So I just wanted to start off by let's drill down a little bit on the Canadian Media Fund. $340,000 of taxpayer money went to Anastasia Trofimov. And anyway, she, as you mentioned, was a former employee of RT, Russian Television Today. Do you believe that the government of Canada should recoup those funds for funding Russian misinformation?
Absolutely. I think it's... Sorry, I don't know if that was directed to me.
Both witnesses.
No, sorry. Well, I'll start then.
If you can start.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think it's scandalous that Canadian taxpayer money funded this production, and we call for a full investigation as to what she said on her application. Did she disclose that she worked for RT? Because of course RT has scrubbed any reference to her from their website. They understand that that's a liability now. But we need to understand whether the Canadian funding agencies knew that she was a former employee. She produced 11 films for them. Whether they knew that she was entering sovereign Ukrainian territory with an invading army that is committing war crimes. So these are questions that need to be asked, and I think the funding should be refunded, because I am sure that the Kremlin is just giggling at how clever they were in tricking Canadians.
Are there witness any comment on that propaganda film?
Thank you. So the RCDA opposes any film that minimizes or hides the atrocities committed by the Russian government or the Russian army in its invasion of.
Hey Storm, what's up? How are you today? Good to see you. Always. Let me zip up here. I saw some other people. Welcome, Ricardo. How are you doing, man? What a shaken. Lois Hurst, always a pleasure to see you in the chat room. Again, if I miss anybody on here, I'm trying my best. Did I see Dominic? Nope. Sorry, back to the show.
Ukraine. At the same time, we do believe that there's a place for honest journalism and documentary films from the conflict. The RCDA doesn't have information.
What's up, Two Flips? How can I miss you?
But if the investigation shows that this film was organized
Steve
under
Bloy?
false
Good to see you,
pretenses
man.
on its application
Good to see you, Steve Bloy. Always a pleasure. What's up, brother?
with the Russian government, then we do support further action.
So wouldn't we just assume, though, if there's a journalist or a media, or in this case, a director embedded with the Russian troops, that they're there with the blessing of the Kremlin?
I can speak to that. Absolutely. It is inconceivable that Russian military intelligence did not know that this woman spent 7 months embedded in occupied territory. It just...
What's the role of the Canadian government then, other than getting back our taxpayer dollars? What role do they have in seeing whether or not that she actually filmed, maybe has footage of war crimes being committed, which of course are all glossed over in the propaganda film? And what international rules did she, or laws that she essentially broke that the government has not yet taken any action on?
So we know she violated Ukrainian law by entering into occupied territory without the permission of Ukrainian authorities. There is the possibility of violation of sanctions, and the RCMP would be well served to investigate the circumstances around her filming of this documentary. And of course, the RCMP is collecting evidence of war crimes and should seize her footage. She claims she saw no evidence of war crimes, but in 7 months, we know that every single territory that is liberated from Russian occupation, we find evidence of war crimes. We know that they are torturing and executing Ukrainian prisoners of war. So it's inconceivable that in the 7 months she saw nothing.
Okay, you said that you've had a couple of meetings with the former and the current Minister of Public Safety about Russian disinformation, and you are not satisfied with the response that you've received to date from either, I'm assuming it was Minister Blair and his predecessor?
No, I should clarify, it was with Minister Mendicino.
Okay.
What's up, Jason Thunder? Good to see you. Always a pleasure, man.
Request to make a public statement, and we have not been able to secure a meeting with Minister LeBlanc.
Okay. So won't even meet with you on this important issue and how we deal with disinformation. So another cover-up.
What's up, Mr. Kennedy? Good to see you, Rory.
You mentioned other activities of the Russian Federation and going back to Soviet times. Do you believe that journalism in this country is outside of social media, which we know that they've really penetrated in, and RT, of course, and other propaganda tools that they've used, but are any of our mainstream media, do you believe, has been compromised by either the Soviets or the Kremlin today?
Well, I think if you look at the reporting, it is very often word for word what is coming out of the Kremlin and out of the Russian embassy. So I'll say to you, Mr. Bazan, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's not a chicken.
How much? 12. So just in closing, are you aware of any evidence of any journalists today that or academics that are been compromised because of ties back to the Kremlin?
We know that at the University of Ottawa, there is a regular contributor to Russia television, and we know that at the University of Carleton, there is a prominent member of the Valdai Club, which is Putin's think tank.
Thank you, Mr. Bazan. We go now to Ms. O'Connell. Ms. O'Connell.
This is going to be fun, guys. This is Smelly Cat. What a time this is going to be. Jennifer O'Connell, go get him.
An attempt to shut it down or limit it, as our first witnesses have already highlighted pretty significant areas of concerns. And I think it's imperative that this committee do this work. And so I'd be quite disappointed after that line of questioning to see any sort of limitations of looking into this study coming from conservatives or any attempts to not continue with this study when this is our first day. So I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see if there's action behind the words we just heard. Moving to my questions, you know, I found, and this is going to be directed at both organizations, as a local MP, I could honestly feel a shift and a difference in the narrative around the public perception with the invasion in Ukraine. I remember early days attending vigils in my community in Uxbridge with a large Ukrainian population as an example, and how quickly on social media that support for Ukraine started to erode. Even in our first debates of the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, it was pretty non-eventful. There seemed to be all-party support. And then you start to see things shift. And a large part of that was changes in narrative online, on social media accounts. And so when this came forward in regards to influencers being potentially and allegedly paid by Russia to look and mimic like Canadian organizations or Canadian social media pages, you start to put two and two together, as I could very clearly see that shift as just a local MP with Ukrainians in my riding as one example. But overall, hearing people start to defend Russia or seeing Russian flags on the Hill and protests to anything, really. So my first question is, and I'll like both of your perspectives on this. Do you really believe that influencer accounts that were being funded or allegedly being funded by Russia, do you really believe that they didn't know who was paying? Or is there a world in which people wouldn't know that Russia is sending propaganda? And the comment about if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, and if you're repeating Russian propaganda and then to claim you had no idea you were being paid by or repeating Russian propaganda. Have you seen other examples where, you know, this claim that they had no idea who was footing the bill? So maybe I'll start here, if you don't mind.
Thank you. I would say that even though these right now are still allegations, personally, even a cursory search would show that these perspectives are coming from the Russian government. Many times they're, if not word for word, they're idea for idea, the idea is coming from the Kremlin, propagated in Russian government propaganda channels. And just addressing something said earlier, I agree with Mr. Shechi that RCDA is dissatisfied with the Canadian government response to the disinformation that we have seen permeating Canadian social media, but also in regards to enforcement of the measures that have been enacted, including sanctions. We have questions as to how these sanctions are enforced, why violations of sanctions seem to be, these investigations seem to be coming from the United States, not from within Canada. Even if a lot of the disinformation seems to be happening in the United States, due to the interconnectedness of the Canadian-American ecosystems, narratives that originate there, permeate, eventually end up in Canada and affect the national discourse here.
If I may add, just as to your prior comments about the changing narrative among your constituents, this is actually something that's increasingly backed by data. There are some interesting analysis, including from Marcus Kolga, that shows that there are more and more Canadians that are exposed to the Kremlin narrative online, and that these narratives are having an impact on how Canadians think about the Ukraine war, for instance. And this is not only a Ukraine war issue, it's also an issue that targets broader issues in Canadian politics, such as the housing crisis, the inflation, and even the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. That has been something that the Kremlin has done in Canada for close to a decade, as my friend alluded to in his testimony.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I am just limited on time, and I'd like to get, but just, do you think it's also problematic when politicians are being paid to fly to around the world by institutions like the Danube Institute, who has been known to also promote anti-Ukraine and more so Kremlin propaganda. Do you think it's problematic if Canadian politicians are also being paid for institutes that share that? And maybe I'll start here since I know I'm limited on time.
Absolutely, because there is the possibility and the appearance of bias, and so I think that all trips paid by other entities should be banned for Canadian politicians. But I beg to differ with my friend. I believe that there was a Canadian social media influencer who was working for Tenant, Lauren Southern, and she did produce videos on immigration crime, anti-white sentiment, anti-LGBTQ plus paranoia, residential school unmarked graves, inflation, the housing crisis, Canada is on the brink of chaos, and of course Canada is becoming a communist hellhole under Justin Trudeau. So these are not just American-directed narratives. Canada was directly targeted.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up quickly.
Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. On y va maintenant, Monsieur Fortin. Monsieur, allez-y.
Mr. Fortin, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I hope the interpretation is working. Can you hear me? And Mr. Nowodworsky, I've been listening to your testimony. This is an important and worrying issue. Interference by Russia.
What do you guys think? Let's cross over to the debate that's going on the floor in the House Commons right now. We'll get that going. Because I'd rather listen to a slow debate in the House Commons than the Bloc Québécois and what questions they have to ask in the committee. Nothing against the French, just don't like the Bloc Québécois. No problem with the French. I study French. I took courses recently, and I will again. Working on my skills.
The amount of money that a senior can
we're
earn
jumping straight
before
into,
they actually are clawed back on the guaranteed income supplement or their old age security check. That's important. Now, we've moved that from $3,500, Mr. Speaker, up to $5,000, and now it's 50-cent dollars from the amount from $5,000 to $10,000. That's great. I'd like to see this government do more, and hopefully in the fall economic statement, hopefully in the budget, we can see that go even higher, because if we do have seniors who are still able and wanting to contribute by working, we don't want there to be an impediment to them actually working because they're worried about losing their seniors benefits.
So I'm going to take a moment, guys, and say hello to some people that joined the chat more recently. Crystal Lamont, welcome back. Good to see you, Eddie Cassidy. I hope you enjoy it here. Jason Thunder, I don't think I had a chance to say hello yet. Kenzie Kraken sister, what is going on? Just me, always a pleasure to see you. What is going on? Louise LeBourne, how are you doing? Good to see you. Did I get a chance to say hello, Ricardo? Welcome to the group. Scott Campbell, always a pleasure to see you here. Good to see you, for sure. Did I get a chance to say hello, Storm? Not sure. We've got Chris Murray, good to see you. And Bannister Post, what is going on? Autumn Christian, what is going on? Good to see you, welcome. And that is it. Ken Allen, in case I missed you. Again, if I miss anybody, it's just because there's a lot going on. We're going to get back to the House floor, and we'll listen to, I know this guy a little tiny bit. Back to that.
Mais lorsque vous examinez le...
Remember to like, subscribe. It does help a great deal. Consider a membership. We have a lot of fun videos that we do here. And yeah, that's it. That's kind of how we're making our living.
For seniors, for example, as I mentioned, they voted against. Lowering the retirement age, they voted against. Strengthening the GIS, they voted against. With regard to the text of the motion, yes, of course. The initiatives within this bill are all well and good. Initiatives are good, but the way that the motion has been tabled, asking for royal recommendation, Well, it's very rare for a government. It's very rare for a government to add a royal recommendation.
To be able to have one of my honourable colleagues step up and ask me a question. Thank you.
Question et commentaire, l'honorable. The honourable member for Berthier-Mesquite-Longet. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I was rather flummoxed by this speech from a colleague who usually makes sense. He just said that the members of the Bloc don't care for seniors. That's probably why we're trying to table this motion. Maybe that's why we've been fighting for 5 years, so that his government finally acts in an equitable way for all seniors. We're ready to enter an election. Is he ready for an election on seniors? The Honourable Member for King's Hands. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague. But the voting record is eminently clear. This member and the other members of the Bloc Québécois voted against dental care for seniors. They voted against lowering the retirement age, and they voted against strengthening the GIS. So, yes, thank you very much for playing the game, but it's too late for the Bloc Québécois. And we'll move to answers after question period. 4 minutes remain.
Statements by members, déclaration des députés. The honourable member for Bonavista, Buren, Trinity.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to acknowledge a group of 7 harvesters from my riding who went to work at sea this past July and endured a terrifying experience. Their boat, the Elite Navigator, did not arrive back home, and as expected, this set off a massive search effort headed by the Canadian Coast Guard. 51 hours later, and just after the crew had used their last emergency flare, rescuers were able to locate them. Thankfully, all the men were healthy and otherwise uninjured. Transported home by the Coast Guard, they were greeted to a hero's welcome in Newest Valley by hundreds of people. The story speaks to the importance of the Coast Guard, and I am proud of the investments our government has made to new lifeboat stations around the coastline of Newfoundland and Labrador to monitor and support mariners in distress. Mr. Speaker, I want to express my appreciation to all involved in this search and rescue mission, and my relief that these lucky 7 men are back home. Welcome home, boys.
Good job. The honourable member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, it was an immense honour to spend time with and present the King Charles III Coronation Medals to 2 extraordinary Canadian Forces veterans from Kamloops who played pivotal roles in D-Day efforts. Zach Bork, a 101-year-old Royal Canadian Air Force veteran, served with unwavering dedication as a supply technician, defending Britain's coast during these critical moments. His courage and commitment during D-Day are nothing short of inspiring. I also had the profound privilege of awarding the same coronation medal to John Kaharski, a 104-year-old veteran who bravely stormed the shores of Juno Beach during the D-Day invention. He even can recount that day in great detail at 104 years of age. To Zach and John, I extend my deepest gratitude. Your incredible service and sacrifice has helped preserve the values and freedoms that define our great Canadian way of life. You are true heroes. We are forever indebted to you. Thank you for your service.
The honourable member for Longueuil, Charlemagne.
To pay tribute today to an exceptional citizen of Longueuil-Charlemagne and someone I'm proud to call a friend. Dan Lamoureux first joined Riverside School Board 26 years ago, serving as chair of its Council of Commissioners for the last decade. During his tenure, he was instrumental in making Riverside one of the highest performing school boards in Quebec with a graduation rate of 88.5%. Dan was previously president of the Quebec English School Board Association, where he played a key role in ensuring the survival of Quebec's English language school boards. Demonstrating a lifetime of service, Dan was a firefighter for the City of Westmount, a frequent volunteer in Greenfield Park, and a strong advocate for the English language community in Quebec, serving as president of the QCGN. As he begins a well-deserved retirement, I'm sure he's looking forward to spending more time with his sons and grandsons and his wife Joanne, who I'm sure already has a list of projects for him to do. Dan, I'm sorry I can't be at your retirement party this evening, but I wanted to recognize your incredible contributions and wish you all the best. Thank you.
The honourable member for, excuse me, if we could please quiet down, it would be good to hear the statements by members.
So we can have some silence, so we can hear the presentations from our members. And to that point, I'll probably re-ask the honourable member for Kamloops Thompson Carberry to redo his in a few moments.
The honourable member for Thérèse de Blainville. Today, we have the great pleasure of welcoming 40 young students from the St. Thérèse Academy Student Council, which is in my riding. This is the 13th Student Council, and the members here are very active in introducing young people to political life by sparking debate on social and political issues, and by proposing projects and activities for and by these young Academy members. I would like to salute their commitment, as well as that of their teachers and the school authorities. Parliamentarian work is not always easy, but is essential and extremely stimulating. It is a privilege to serve the people who elected us, and it is an equal privilege to welcome you here today. Have a good term. The honourable member for Sudbury.
October 1st is recognized as Seniors' Day in Canada and all around the world. Today we celebrate seniors across our country and acknowledge the significant contributions they have made to our families, our communities, and society at large. From fighting for our freedoms to building the railroad, highways, schools, and hospitals, from creating vibrant community centres and gathering places, seniors have helped build the great country Canada is today. This National Seniors Day, I would especially like to acknowledge the formation of the Canadian Senior Living Association. CSLA is a group of provincial associations across the country advocating for seniors' issues on a national scale. Congratulations to the Canadian Senior Living Association on its launch, and happy National Seniors Day to our seniors. Thank you for all that you have done and continue to do.
The honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
I rise today to honour the life of Hugh Michael Green. Hugh immigrated to Alberta with his family in 1928. A centenarian, he was 101 years old at the time of his passing. A living definition of a gentleman, Hugh loved his family, community, and country, and brought honour to all his deeds. After graduating from Wetaskiwin High School, he joined the RCAF, where he served in England and Germany until 1946. When he returned home from the Air Force, he married the love of his life, Doris. They called Ponoka their home for more than 65 years. Together they raised 5 children, had 5 grandchildren, and 9 great-grandchildren. And I'm so glad that Hugh and Doris were able to recently celebrate their 75th wedding anniversary. He was remembered in the Ponoka community as one of the last veterans of the Second World War. He was the embodiment of Canada's greatest generation. The Royal Canadian Legions across our country recently put their flags at half-mast to honour Hugh, who once served as the Legion's Dominion President. On behalf of a grateful community and a nation, thank you, Hugh, for a life well lived. Rest in peace, my friend.
And I'll recall on the honourable member for Kamloops Thompson Carberry to redo his presentation.
Mr. Speaker, it was an immense honor to spend time with and present the King Charles III Coronation Medals to 2 extraordinary Canadian Forces veterans who played invaluable roles on D-Day efforts. Zach Bork, a 101-year-old Royal Canadian Air Force veteran from Kamloops, served with unwavering dedication as a supply technician, defending Britain's coast during those critical moments. His courage and commitment during D-Day were nothing short of inspiring. I also had the profound privilege of awarding the same coronation medal to 104-year-old John Kaharski, a veteran who bravely stormed the shores of Juno Beach during the D-Day invasion. He can even recount those details with tremendous clarity. To Zach and John, I expend my deepest gratitude. Your incredible service and sacrifice have helped preserve the values and freedoms that define our great nation. We are indebted to you. Thank you for your service.
The Honourable Member for Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, today we reflect on the significance of both Truth and Reconciliation Day and Senior Day, honouring the profound history and contribution that shape our Canadian identity. Yesterday, we reflected on the resilience and contribution of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people and organizations in Richmond Hill, such as Odwin. I speak with sincere gratitude for their important work on an Indigenous-led non-for-profit providing vital employment and education program across York Region. And as we celebrate National Senior Day today, I recognize leaders including Montchalm Foundation, Caribbean North Charities Foundation, among others. They're crucial in the helping seniors in my riding age well at home, stay informed and connected, and live with dignity and security. In recognizing both days, we embrace the lessons of our past while fostering compassion and unity in the present. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to commend the Vaudreuil-Soulanges Chamber of Commerce on its 30th anniversary. For the past 3 decades, this vital organization has been an important resource for our business community by helping stimulate economic growth, innovation, and collaboration in our region. Whether it be by helping business people network or stimulating local development, the Chamber has played a key role in transforming Vaudreuil-Soulanges' economic landscape. Its dedication and diligent work have created a number of opportunities that have helped our small businesses grow. We are celebrating this important step, and I would like to recognize the exceptional leadership of the staff, members, and partners of the Chamber. And I hope that the next 30 years are just as prosperous and successful. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from King Aurora.
King
Vaughan. Forgive me.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. Mr. Speaker, today is Seniors Day, and it is an honour to serve as the Shadow Minister for Seniors. Seniors have dedicated their lives to the prosperity of this country. They have made incredible sacrifices in order to provide for their families and plan for the future. Seniors should be able to retire on their savings and enjoy their golden years in peace and financial security. Seniors' retirement income is simply not keeping up with the pace of the cost of living crisis. The continuous increase of the carbon tax affects the price of groceries, gas, and home heating. This is the reckless record of this NDP Liberal government on seniors. Conservatives will promote financial securities, create policies that do not penalize seniors, and that encourage meaningful connections for our valued seniors. It's time for carbon tax elections so Canadians can decide.
The Honourable Member for Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is National Seniors Day. Seniors, older Canadians, elders, lived and contributed to our country for 50, 60, or even 100 years. Yesterday, the Day for Truth and Reconciliation, I saw the great respect Indigenous communities accord their elders, one of many Indigenous practices that would lead to the betterment of our society. I'd like to recognize some of our local organizations that support seniors. Chats, Crescent Village, Richmond Hill and Elgin West Seniors Club, Aurora Seniors, the Italian Talon Indian Seniors Clubs, Moncton, and Seniors for Climate Change, who are demonstrating right now. Our government's support for seniors is solid and enduring. OAS, GIS, dental care, farmer care, the caregiver credit, aging in place. We will never put a singular ideological focus on a balanced budget ahead of support for older Canadians, who have not only helped build Canada, but continue to make Canada the best country on earth. To my 89-year-old parents and all seniors across Canada, thank you and happy Seniors Day.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lobinière. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives, just like thousands of Canadians and Quebecers, have lost trust in this Prime Minister and are fearing this opportunistic bloc party.
I'm guessing we're about 3 minutes out. maybe 2 minutes out from question period. It should be on schedule because Chris Donchma seems to be the House Speaker today. Hopefully that'll continue. Sometimes they do switches. Anyhow, there's a few new people in the room. I might have missed Canada RV earlier. Terry Hooper, always a pleasure. Glad to have you back. Jeff Vanderkooy, what is up? Common Sense, good to see you. JT87, what is going on? If I miss anybody, I'm really sorry about that. It's just a lot of people to say hello to. However, back to the show.
The Conservative Party. The Bloc can boast the worst negotiator in history, and the fact that it doesn't care about the Quebec nation, it's just ready to sell its soul instead of offering Canadians the country they deserve. Will the Bloc vote to...
The Honourable Member from Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, taxes are up, costs are up, crime's up, and time's up. And Canadians are finding the dream of Canada shattered. A country where you could once find a good job, buy a home in a safe neighborhood, afford groceries, access reliable health care, and pay fair taxes is slipping away. This Liberal NDP government's reckless spending and socialist agenda have committed economic vandalism. GDP per capita is down. Unemployment rates, especially for our youth, are up. Household debt is up and taxes are up. All this when Canada, under these Liberals, starts at third base and they act like they're hitting a triple. We need a rich talent. We have the talent, the resources. We should be hitting a home run. Canada is mirrored in economic vandalism, but common sense will lead us home. We will cap spending, axe Texas, reward work, build homes, uphold families, stop crime, secure borders, rearm our forces, restore our freedom, and unite our people. Canada, let's hit a home run and bring it home! Yeah!
The Honourable Member for Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, Westmount.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Today to highlight the transformational impact of the Canadian Dental Care Plan, which has already benefited over 750,000 Canadians, including over 5,000 residents of Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, Westmount. And that number continues to rise. This initiative has made essential dental services accessible, reducing the financial burden on families and promoting better oral health. Le plan ne se...
This plan goes further than just meeting immediate dental needs. It also encourages preventive care, which will allow our fellow citizens to keep their smile for years to come. Let's continue to support and develop this essential program by strengthening our commitment to health and welfare for all Canadians. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Esquimalt, Saanich Sooke.
Speaker, I rise to mark 1 year since October 7th attacks on Israel. This was the single deadliest day Jewish people have faced since the Holocaust, and it forever changed their world. On October 7th, Hamas terrorists took 251 civilians hostage while killing over 1,200 people, including 8 Canadians. Judy Weinstein, Vivian Silver, Ben Mizrahi, Neda Epstein, Shir Georgi, Adi Vital Kaploun, Alexander Locke, and Tiferet Lapido. May their memories be a blessing. In the years since, Jewish Canadians have faced an alarming rise in anti-Semitic hate crimes, with vandalism, bomb threats, and open calls for violence against Jews. Jewish Canadians wearing a Magen David or yarmulke in public or placing a mezuzah outside their homes face harassment and threats to their safety, all with the added stress of ongoing deadly rocket attacks targeting friends and family in Israel. Jewish Canadians are calling for action. We know all too well the dire consequences of turning a blind eye to anti-Semitism. It is time to work together to demand the return of all hostages and to chart a path toward a just and lasting negotiated peace for all.
The Honourable Member for Shefford. What a happy coincidence. The Bloc Québécois Opposition Day, calling for a royal recommendation for Bill C-319, falls today on October 1st, the International Day of Older People. This bill seeks to make everything fair for all seniors. And with inflation, we must recognize those who have fixed incomes and that are directly impacted and need a hike in their OAS. We have to not leave them in a state of financial vulnerability because poverty does not wait for the age of 75. and those who wish to remain on the labor market should be able to do so without being penalized. Let us recognize their diversity, but also let us think about their place in society. We owe them respect because they are the ones who have forged Quebec. So let's take a day to realize the richness that they bring us. It is our duty to treat them with respect and to ensure that their social safety net allows them to age in dignity.
The honourable member from Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time's up. This Prime Minister's economic vandalism is making Canadians poorer with every passing year. Per capita GDP is lower than it was 9 years ago and shrinking. Since 2015, Canada has had the worst per capita GDP in the G7. We're down 2%, while the U.S. is up 8%. That's what 9 years of capital flight looks like. We have abundant land and resources and great workers, but Canada no longer has the tools and the technology to compete because of capital flight. Since 2015, $500 billion has shifted from Canada to the United States, especially in the energy industry. Investments are leaving Canada to create high-paying jobs, building mines, factories, pipelines, and houses in the United States. From 2001 to 2014, it was Canada that won the investment tug-of-war with the U.S. That's why we need a Conservative government now to clean up this government's economic vandalism and make up for 9 lost years.
Hear, hear. The honourable member from Mount Royal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow night is the beginning of the Jewish New Year. Normally, this is a festive time, one of joy and celebration. But this year, there is a shadow. The last year has been an annus horribilis for Jews. Next week is the anniversary of October the 7th, a day Hamas attacked Israel, slaughtered over 1,200 people, and kidnapped hundreds of others. Then a wave of anti-Semitism swept across the world. People here at home telling Jews to go back to Poland, firing shots into our schools, yelling hateful slogans outside our community buildings, setting up encampments on university campuses, and attacking our support for Israel. I pray that this new year is a better one. I pray for a world where Israel can defend itself from Iranian and Hezbollah missiles without being condemned, and one where it can live securely in peace with its neighbors. And I pray for a Canada where Jewish Canadians can feel safe again, as all governments take real action to confront anti-Semitism.
Chers collègues, j'ai l'honneur.
It's in the batter's box. Let's go.
I have the honor of informing this House that the clerk has received from the Chief Electoral Officer notice of the election of Mr. Sauvé in the riding of La Salle et Marverdun.
Whatever. So it should be a pretty fun episode today, pretty fun question period. I'm hoping that it's going to be exciting. This is the bloc that got elected. Who cares, right? Again, nothing against Quebec. I love Quebec. I like French. I think it's important. Not a fan of the Bloc Québécois. I think they just get in the way. Anyways, I saw Poilievre in the batter's box, so he's ready to go.
La Salle et Marverdun, who swore an oath before the registry and now is asking for the right to sit here. I invite the honourable member to take a seat.
Chers collègues,
before moving on to question period. I would like to note that since we have returned from our summer recess, there have been a number of questions and comments that have gone beyond the bounds in this House.
In question period, to only let the person who is speaking to ask the question and the person responding to respond, and to slow down your heckling. Oral questions. Questions,
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Liberal bloc, they have doubled the debt, increased taxes. After these 9 years, seniors are struggling to pay the bills. Record numbers of seniors have to go to food banks to eat. They're struggling to pay rent since the cost of housing has doubled. Their children and grandchildren can't buy a home like they would have been able to in other times. Will the government accept our common sense plan? We want to fix the budget and axe the tax so that our seniors can pay their bills with dignity. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, seniors in Canada remember very well what Conservative policy for seniors were. They remember that in Davos, Prime Minister Harper announced that he would increase the retirement age from 65 to 67. As for grandchildren, seniors support our national daycare program for their grandchildren.
Chrystia Freeland, we're probably going to see a lot of her today. And Pierre's doing 2 questions in French. Come on, Pierre.
Instead, he should be defending the nation of Quebec. But rather than doing so, he says he's happy that the forestry sector is under threat. Quebec's environment minister said the opposite, though. He said, I would like the Bloc Québécois to defend us more strongly than they are currently. Will the Prime Minister listen to those who really truly have common sense and permanently reverse this decree? The Honourable Public Services and Procurement Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Conservative leader talks about squabbles. Well, he's picked a fight with each and every single municipality in Quebec. He's called mayors incompetent. Will he finally apologize for calling municipalities, their employees, incompetent? When he was Minister of Housing, he built a grand total of 6 housing units. The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. I would ask you to please leave the floor to those who are recognized by the chair. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Carbon tax carney became conflict of interest carney when the Prime Minister named him to be effectively the Phantom Finance Minister to advise on economic policy while he presides over a massive multi-billion-dollar multinational corporation that sought 10 billion Canadian tax dollars to take over our pension system. He's got a $2 billion loan for a friend, and now we learn that the Economic Task Force he heads up has only 1 person. Isn't he a walking, talking conflict of interest?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we are glad to get economic advice from smart former Canadian central bankers like Mark Carney and like Steve Pelosi, who is doing some great work advising us on how to encourage Canadian pension funds to invest more in Canada. Meanwhile, Mr. Speaker, on that side of the House, they get their foreign policy advice from Elon Musk and from Tucker Carlson. They should be ashamed of themselves. The people of Ukraine certainly know what's going on.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, today the Premier, Mr. Speaker, today the very courageous and common sense Premier of New Brunswick launched a renewed lawsuit against the quadrupling carbon tax. He's pointing out that this carbon tax will force the layoff of nurses, doctors, and teachers because of the extra cost it imposes on operating schools and hospitals. Instead of requiring courts to decide on the quadrupling carbon tax, why won't the Prime Minister let the people decide in a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
I am so glad that the Leader of the Opposition gives me an opportunity to talk about the price on pollution, because we made a great announcement just a few minutes ago, and that is that small businesses in the province of New Brunswick that he was talking about that have 499 employees are going to get rebates of $43,413. In the province of Ontario that we both represent, a business of 499 employees can get a rebate of nearly $300,000. They're going to get that money directly in their bank accounts by the end of the year.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Almost a year ago today, Tehran-backed terrorists unleashed the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust. Ever since, they've continued to push this genocidal aim. Today, hundreds of rockets came from Tehran towards Israel, forcing millions into shelter. 2 terrorist attacks carried out. This Prime Minister has talked out of both sides of his mouth, saying one thing to one group, the opposite to another. Will the Prime Minister state clearly that Israel has the right to defend itself by defeating Hezbollah, Hamas, the IRGC, and all the other terrorists?
The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, we all seen the attacks by Iran against Israel today, and of course we condemn them unequivocally. These attacks from Iran will only serve to further escalate the region. And therefore, that is why I've been in contact with my Israeli counterpart this morning, and I've been in contact with many G7 foreign ministers as well as Arab countries' foreign ministers. This is a very dangerous time for the Middle East, and we need to make sure that this war stops. Thank you.
So what do you think there, gang? Is Israel safe because Melanie Joly is our Minister of Foreign Affairs, extramarital affairs, whatever, some kind of affairs? She seems real simple.
And ask the Honourable Member from St. Albert, Edmonton, please, to only take the floor when he is recognized to do so. L'honorable député de La Prairie.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. If the Liberals don't want an election now, then they have to support all seniors equally and fairly. That's why seniors advocacy groups are here today on the Hill. The FADOC and its Mauricie branch, the AQDR, the Outaouais AQRP and AREQ, the Table de Concertation des Aînés des Laurentides, they're all here today to ask the federal government to stop having 2 classes of seniors. They're here to demand a 10% increase in OAS for those 74 and under. Will the government finally listen to them? The Honourable Minister of Labour and Seniors. Mr. Speaker, we're shocked by what the Bloc Québécois is saying. Because what did they vote against? They voted against dental care, which is currently saving hundreds of dollars for hundreds of thousands of Quebecers and Canadians. We're shocked that the Bloc Québécois voted against the guaranteed income supplement and its increase. The GIS helps the least well-off seniors, Mr. Speaker. The Bloc Québécois is so hypocritical, and we are shocked. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. It is the International Day of Older Persons today. So suffice it to say that today's not the best day to avoid answering seniors' questions about OAS, especially not when seniors' representatives are here watching us. So we're going to give the Liberals another chance. They have until October 29th to stop depriving people aged 74 and under of 10% of their OAS. International Seniors Day would be the best possible day to announce that the Liberals are finally going to do it. So, will the Liberals give royal recommendation to C319, yes or no? The Honourable Minister of Labour and Seniors. Well, Mr. Speaker, I would like to wish everyone happy International Seniors Day, especially representatives of the Outaouais.
McKinnon is a bum. What do you guys think? Give me a like if you think McKinnon's a bum, because I do.
Rises daily, but doesn't seem to remember that when it came time to vote to increase, that is, to decrease the retirement age to 65, what did the member for La Prairie do? He, in fact, voted against it. He wanted to keep the retirement age.
From Nunavut.
Another injustice, another day in court for the Liberals. 2 Ontario First Nations are suing this government for their discriminatory underfunding of fire services in their communities. With climate change and aging infrastructure, First Nations are at higher risks. Instead of wasting more time in court, will the Liberals stop the discrimination against First Nations, truly commit to reconciliation, and deliver the funding needed to save lives?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite is right. We all have to do more to protect the lives of Indigenous people, in particular First Nations children, who are many times more likely to die in a house fire than their non-Indigenous counterparts. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, we've invested over $136 million for First Nations self-determined projects to reduce the risks of fire, including making homes safer and ensuring equipment is available and working.
The Honourable Member from Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, Indigenous people have a right to culturally informed community health care when they need it. But because of failed healthcare policies under the Liberal and Conservative governments, nearly 10 years since the release of the final report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, healthcare gaps for Indigenous people have widened. So, Mr. Speaker, why won't the Prime Minister listen to Indigenous experts and leadership and design a healthcare system that ensures access to this basic human right?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, in fact, that's exactly what this government has done. In fact, with the renewed health transfers, separate money, $2 billion dedicated to First Nations leaders who are working on health transformation, self-determined healthcare services across this country. And on top of that, Mr. Speaker, another 10 years of funding for the First Nations Health Authority to continue to plan and deliver health services for First Nations people in BC. We will get this work done together, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to quote one of the world's most credible news organization on financial and economic matters. The Financial Times of London, May 10th, 2024. The headline: Breakdown nations like Canada have a lesson for the world. Canada leads nations which have suffered a sharp decline in per capita GDP. Simple question. Does the government agree that Canada leads nations that have suffered a sharp decline in per capita GDP?
Wow. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
What the government agrees with is that Canada was the first G7 country to lower interest rates for the first time. Canada was the first G7 country to lower interest rates for a second time, and Canada was the first G7 country to lower interest rates for a third time. The government also knows that wages in Canada have outpaced inflation for 19 months in a row. And meanwhile, inflation, 2% in August, has been within the Bank of Canada's target range.
Again, I'm going to invite members, please, not to take the floor unless they're being invited to by the chair. The Honourable Member from Halton Hills, Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, the Bank of Canada has become the first central bank to cut rates because Canada has become the first leading economy to go through an economic contraction. Again, the Financial Times, for which the finance minister once worked, it said, quote, Canada's per capita gross domestic product has been shrinking 0.4% a year since 2020, the worst rate for any developed economy in the top 50. Does the government agree that Canada's per capita GDP is shrinking at the worst rate of any of the top 50 economies.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, our government knows that what matters to Canadians is inflation. And that is why it is so important that inflation was 2% in August and that it has been within the Bank of Canada's target range all of this year. And it is because of that progress that interest rates in Canada have come down 3 times. That is real relief to homeowners. That is real relief to businesses. That is real relief to anyone who wants to buy a home. But all the Conservatives know how to do is talk Canada down.
That's right.
And I ask the honourable member from Dufferin Caledon, please, to hold his time until he has the floor, which he often does during question period. The honourable member from Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, the government loves to tout its economic record, but the results are simply underwhelming. Canada has the worst housing inflation among its peers, the worst performance in per capita income among the G7, gross fixed capital formation has not increased in a decade, and R&D spending as a percent of GDP is at its lowest point in 20 years. It's no wonder why young Canadians and businesses are packing up in search of better economic opportunities and higher standards of living. When will the government admit that its economic policies are putting the future of Canada at risk?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
You know, Mr. Speaker, what I find so interesting about these Conservatives is the only thing they know how to do is talk Canada down. A couple of months ago, the only thing they wanted to talk about was inflation. But guess what? We have good news on inflation, and with that good news on inflation comes good news on interest rates. On this side of the House, we celebrate good news for Canada and Canadians. On that side of the House, all they want to do is break things and cut.
The honourable member from Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not surprised the minister is not persuaded by my comments, but perhaps you might listen to economist Trevor Tombe, who said if Canada had simply kept pace with the U.S. over the past 2 years, our economy would be 8.5% larger. That's $6,200 per person richer we would be. Wow. Trevor Tombe says that is an incentive for Canadians and businesses to move south of the border in search of greater economic opportunities and higher standards of living. Mr. Speaker, when the Deputy Prime Minister says that her economic plan is working, is this what she means?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, we're even better than that, Mr. Speaker. We've attracted $60 billion of investment in this country, Mr. Speaker. Even Bloomberg put Canada ahead of China for the battery ecosystem in this country, Mr. Speaker. We have the talent, we have the ecosystem, we have the critical mineral, we have the renewable energy, we have the access to market. Let's talk about possibility, let's talk about opportunities, let's talk about Canada of the 21st century, Mr. Speaker. Let's be...
He's a fake little lapdog. What do you guys think of FPC?
Colleagues, as we know, question period is of a limited time. I've been reminded that many times. I've allowed it to go on, but if we have to interrupt all the time, we might get to the point where we might need to end a question due to a little heckling. So I'll ask the honourable members to please not do so. L'honorable...
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Mr. Speaker, it is high time to put an end to this bloc-backed Liberal government's economic vandalism. Under this Prime Minister, Canada has recorded the worst per capita income growth, or GDP, than under any other Prime Minister since 1930. In fact, Canada has experienced the worst income growth in the G7 since 2015, down 2% in Canada and up 8% in the United States. This means lower standard of living for all Canadians, including seniors who no longer have enough money to pay their rent and bills. When will this Liberal bloc think of seniors and stop its economic vandalism? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I've noticed something very interesting coming from the Conservative side of this House. A few months ago, the only word in the Conservatives' vocabulary seemed to be inflation. But today, we have good news about inflation. In August, inflation was at 2%. And Mr. Speaker, all throughout this year, inflation has been in the Bank of Canada's target range. Mr. Speaker, that's good news for Canada and for Canadians. But all Conservatives seem to be interested in is the bad news. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Well, let's talk about the target range, Mr. Speaker. Seniors, Canadians in general, they're no longer able to put food on the table. Why? Because the cost of housing has increased, the cost of food has increased, the cost of everything is up because of this Bloc-supported Liberal government and their decision-making. You know, seniors built Canada and they lived in a Canada that rewarded those who worked hard. Why does the Bloc-backed Liberal Party want to continue to vandalize seniors' pensions by raising taxes again and again? I ask the Honourable Member for La Prairie to not speak before being recognized.
What's up, Raz? Good to see you, man.
Minister of Innovation, Science and Technology. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we do...
Joe Sulfat, good to see you. We've got that Chihuahua up again. What a little dog.
Know that. They understand it. That's why we are attracting generational investments. For instance, Moderna, which set up shop in Laval, or in Bécancour, another huge investment. We want to put Quebec at the forefront of the automobile industry of the 21st century. And people will say to us, thank you. And we thank our workers, and they can count on us to build the Canada of tomorrow and the Canada of the 21st century. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Shefford. The Bloc Québécois is using October 29th as a deadline to be an ultimatum.
This chick kind of looks like a blonde Wednesday Addams. I made that joke before, but a little bit goth, right?
Chapter, the AQDR is here, the Outaouais, AQRP and AREQ are here, the Table de Concertation des Aînés des Laurentides is here. They're all here to demand that we put an end to discrimination against seniors and to demand that we increase OAS by 10% for those 74 and under. They expect a clear answer. Will the government give C319 a royal recommendation? The Honourable Minister of Labour and Seniors. Mr. Speaker, I take great pleasure in calling out the Bloc Québécois for its hypocrisy. The member for Shefford, you know, there are 13,300 people in the riding of Shefford eligible for dental care. These people are saving hundreds upon hundreds of dollars thanks to dental care. But the member for Shefford, she voted against dental care for vulnerable seniors in Quebec. That's shameful, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Shefford. If what the minister is saying were enough, then the FADOC, the AQDR, and several other groups would not be in Ottawa today, and yet they are here today. They're here demanding a 10% increase in old age security for those 74 and under. All seniors deserve the same support as they're all facing the same rising cost of living. Everyone seems to understand that. Seniors do not deserve to be divided into two classes of citizens. It's high time that the Liberals put an end to their age-based discrimination. Will they give C319 a royal recommendation? The Honourable Minister of Seniors and Labour. Mr. Speaker, no party in this House has done as much for seniors in Canada and in Quebec as the Liberal Party of Canada. Despite the opposition of the Conservative Party, the opposition of the Bloc Québécois, because they voted against dental care. They voted against the guaranteed income supplement. They voted against additional housing for vulnerable seniors. But dental care, Mr. Speaker, the Bloc Québécois voted against all of that I just lifted. Now they're accusing us of not supporting seniors. The Bloc Québécois should apologize to seniors and to us.
Juste un instant, madame.
Just a moment, please.
Juste pour vous rappeler, je suis très content de reconnaître l'honorable député.
I'm very happy to recognize the honourable member for Shefford for a third time, but I would encourage her to not speak before recognized by the chair. The honourable member for Shefford. Today is International Day of Older Persons, and on this day, the Bloc Québécois would like to highlight the work of community organizations that support retirees. It is inexcusable that some should be deprived of funding under the Age Well at Home program. It is inexcusable that the government is starving our organizations and depriving Quebec seniors of money and services that are rightfully theirs. It's inexcusable that the federal government is getting into a jurisdictional tiff with Quebec at the expense of seniors. Will the federal government finally transfer Quebec its share of funding and stop holding seniors hostage?
L'honorable ministre du Travail.
The Honourable Minister of Labour and Seniors. Mr. Speaker, we are especially proud of the pilot project, Age Well at Home. That is among our government's priorities. We want seniors to age at home and to age independently and live independently. We have unblocked funding for all provinces. We have sent funding to all provinces. The government of Quebec, though, they need to do their part, and then they will get funding. Organizations like Centre Bénévole and
Good afternoon, Taylor Maid. How are you doing? And just in case I didn't catch you, Terry Hooper, how are you doing?
In the latest conflict of interest from a government of serial ethical lawbreakers, the Prime Minister wants his buddy Mark Carbon Tax Carney's company to be in charge of $10 billion of Canadians' pension dollars. Now, he doesn't want him to be subjected to any of the conflict of interest rules. All the power, all the money, none of the accountability. After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up for Carbon Tax Carney and this Prime Minister. Why don't they just call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Another week, another tired line from the Conservatives. When it comes to Canadians who disagree with their vision of the country, instead of allowing for that disagreement to happen, they attack them personally and try to bring them down. We have seen this time and time again from Conservatives, whether it's the news media like CBC or CTV, or whether it's eminent Canadians who give of themselves. The Conservatives only have one objective, and that's to tear down Canadians who don't share their beliefs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
It's no surprise that that member wants to deflect from her Prime Minister, who was twice found guilty of breaking ethics laws himself, and that's why he's trying to protect his buddy Carbon Tax Carney from the ethical rules that would, of course, call into question this $10 billion of Canadians' pensions that they want to let him get his hands on in exchange for what? Advice that he's going to give them from Bay Street that everyone on Main Street can just eat cake when they can't afford any more of his rising carbon tax. It's been...
It's her spot. I did hear a comment out of turn. I think it was from a minister. I couldn't figure out who it is, but I'll ask members to please, again, don't take the floor unless recognized by the chair. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, what we see from the Conservative members of Parliament is that they just can't handle being criticized. It's the same way they treat the media. When the media ask them tough questions about what they are putting forward in terms of their agenda for Canadians, what do? They attack them. This is what they do with the media. This is what they do with eminent Canadians. This is what they do with any Canadian who doesn't share the vision for Canada. Mr. Speaker, we should be talking up Canada. We should be talking up Canadians instead of talking them down like the Conservatives.
Yeah, good answer.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, first the Liberals announced that Mark Carney, the chair of Brookfield, a $1 trillion corporation whose interests span the entire federal government, would be setting Canada's economic policy. Then news broke that Brookfield had been lobbying for a federally funded multi-billion-dollar investment fund that they would manage. Then, over this past weekend, Mark Carney sent out a fundraising email blast via the Liberal Party's donation list. Interesting. Did the Liberals or Brookfield clear any of this with the lobbying commissioner?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
again, Mr. Speaker, what we see from the Conservatives is when there are Canadians that don't share their vision of Canada, they talk them down. They try.
Invite the Honourable Minister to start again, but I'm going to ask members, please, again, do not take the floor until they're recognized by the Chair. The Honourable Leader of the Government from the House of Commons from the top.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's okay. I understand this response makes them uncomfortable because they know it's true, Mr. Speaker. Right. But when it comes to Canadians who don't share their vision of Canada, what do Conservative members of Parliament do? They talk them down. They try to bring them down. They don't like having people push against their agenda. They don't like it when they're asked tough questions, or when smart, intelligent people don't share their vision of Canada, they try to take them down instead of having that debate. Thank you.
That's right. Good answer.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Nose Hill.
Grifols, a big pharma company, recently gained approval from Canadian Blood Services, which is regulated by the Liberal government, to acquire Canadian plasma resources, a critical source of blood products for Canadians. But this summer, reports said that under this contract, Canadian blood plasma products could be sold abroad for profit by Grifols, something that could jeopardize supply in Canada. Guess which company has been in takeover talks with Grifols this whole time? Brookfield. Is that why the Liberals didn't clear Carney with the lobbying commissioner?
What do you guys think of Rempel Garner? Curious to know.
Where in the world is being absolutely one of the best jurisdictions to manage blood supply, and that is something that we are absolutely committed to continuing. I think that casting aspersions and trying to manufacture things is something we're used to on the other side, but that reputation that we've won hard-earned to make sure that when Canadians need blood that it's there for them and it's there for them safely is something that we're going to continue unabated to be committed to.
I'm going to ask the Honourable Member from St. Margaret's South Shore, please, to he's been keeping his voice down, but it's been regular, so I'm just going to ask him to please not do that. The Honourable Member from Ladysmith, Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, residential school survivors and their families deserve answers. We know that truth comes before healing. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls on all levels of government and churches to hand over all records. But survivors still face barriers, missing records, delays, and disappointments. Why is this government failing to give survivors and their families access to the truth?
The Honourable Minister for Crown Indigenous Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for that very important question. And let me take this opportunity to acknowledge the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation and the many commemorations that took place across this country. From 2015, when the Truth and Reconciliation Report calls to action came in to government, we've been working towards enacting all the 94 calls to action. We will continue to work with survivors in order to ensure that there is truth, justice, and accountability, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton, Griesbach.
The housing crisis in Edmonton rages on, and Indigenous people are disproportionately impacted. Latest reports show that Edmonton's homeless population has jumped by 1,300 people since the start of the year. To make matters worse, last winter's amputations due to frostbite skyrocketed by 162%. With colder temperatures approaching, people are going to lose limbs or die. Will the Liberals continue to stand by and watch alongside Danielle Smith, or will they finally build the homes people in Edmonton desperately need?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, after a decade of nothing happening under the previous Conservative government, we launched the National Housing Strategy. And, Mr. Speaker, we've been working with communities, with First Nations leaders, with Indigenous organizations to ensure that people have access to the kinds of housing that they need. We're not going to stop, Mr. Speaker, until every person in this country knows that there is someplace they can turn as winter approaches.
The Honourable Member from Winnipeg South Centre.
Mr. Speaker, September.
Hey Zia, welcome to the chat room. Good to see you. We've got a great group here. Hope you enjoy it. To all the new viewers, welcome. To all the regular viewers and chatters, welcome back always. It's a fun group.
To intergenerational
Ben Carr has nothing to contribute here, I assure you.
In our country today. Yesterday, communities across Canada came together to honor survivors and their relatives and commit to doing our part on this journey towards truth and reconciliation. I asked the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations to share his reflections with the House on the importance of this day and the work ahead. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister for Crown Indigenous Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and let me begin by acknowledging the work of my friend from Winnipeg. Yesterday was National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, and over the last several days, I've had the opportunity to listen to many survivors, Mr. Speaker, who speak about the enormous loss that they feel. I also have had a chance to speak to many who've been working towards advocating towards finding truth for the loved ones that never came home. This afternoon, we raised the survivors' flag right here on the Hill, and I ask all Canadians to reflect on this day and to ensure that they do their part towards reconciliation.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
After 9 years of this Liberal NDP costly coalition, grocery prices are up 27%, gas prices are up 40%, and now new data from Equifax shows that credit card debt is up too. The average Canadian now has $4,300 on their credit card, the highest on record since the last recession. Why are these Liberals using their carbon tax to inflate the price of everything, punishing families and forcing them to take on more debt just to get by?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am really glad to have the chance to talk about our carbon rebates and our policies on credit cards, because today we announced that later this month, thanks to our government's negotiations with credit card companies, the fees that small businesses have to pay are going down. That is good news for small businesses across the country. And you know what else is good news? Small businesses are going to get big carbon rebates. That member of Parliament, like me as an Ontario MP, an Ontario business with 10 employees is going to be getting
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Speaker, this might be the only person left in the world that thinks paying more tax makes you richer and somehow stops climate change. The carbon tax isn't about the environment, and it's certainly not about affordability. It's about getting more money for her spending addiction. Even Catherine McKenna admits that their plan was always to spend your money. It's clear that they've run out of money. They're going to raise the tax over and over again to 61 cents a litre as 2 million people use a food bank. How many more people will face poverty before they reverse course?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I will give them a number: 69 million cars in avoided pollution. That's our number, Mr. Speaker. That's my number. That's our number on this side of the House. If we listen to them, we would do nothing to fight climate change. Pollution would be even worse. Emissions would be 41% higher than what we've been doing. We're working to fight climate change. We're working to support Canadians to create the economy of the 21st century. They have nothing to offer, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Foothills.
The NDP Liberals are desperately trying to convince Canadians that they're better off paying a higher and higher carbon tax. But the truth hurts. It appears that food inflation isn't a global issue, it's an NDP Liberal issue. Right. According to the food professor, because of the carbon tax, wholesale food prices in Canada are up 34% in every single category. And wholesale food prices in Canada are 37% higher than they are in the United States. Again, because of the carbon tax. Exactly. Will the Prime Minister just admit he was wrong about his carbon tax and call a carbon tax election? Let's go.
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, it seems that Conservatives are now starting to listen to economists, and they quoted Trevor Toombs. Well, let's say what Trevor Toombs has to say about carbon pricing and price on food, Mr. Speaker. And I quote, "While concern around affordability is clearly warranted, climate policies are not a significant driver of the rising cost of living, nor will removing policies such as carbon pricing materially improve the situation." Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable from Foothills.
The NDP Liberals just can't handle the truth. And the truth is Canadians are being forced to food banks in record numbers. And even the Liberal member from Winnipeg North said when you attribute the increase in food prices of 34% to the carbon tax, that's absurd. But the food professor's own data shows the Liberals are wrong. That's right. What is absurd is increasing the carbon tax when 9 million Canadians don't know when their next meal is coming from. Exactly. Will the Prime Minister admit their tax plan is this carbon tax, call a carbon tax election so Canadians could put food on the table? Exactly.
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And being a farmer myself, I know what it's like for farmers to be on the front line of climate change. Our farmers face devastating storms like Hurricane Fiona.
Poor old Larry Macaulay is losing it. I think he's 900 years old. He's older than Yoda, I'm pretty sure. I think he's actually 78. Anyhow, maybe 76, 77. What is this?
Fiona, which tore down barns, killed cattle. We have floods, fires right across the country. This is the reason, one of the reasons why food prices are so high. We put a price in pollution that works, Mr. Speaker. And also, my honourable colleague, in his writing, his average farmer will receive $1,800 a year in carbon rebate. I know the Conservative Party...
The Honourable Member. The Honourable Member for TORIES de Blainville.
Who had just had 2 questions can have more questions if they could work that out with the leadership, but not at this time. But I'll be happy to recognize the Honourable Member when he stands up on his feet when it is time for the people from his political formation to get a question. Alors,
order. The Honourable Member for TORIES de Blainville. The cost of living affects all seniors. There aren't 2 grocery bills, one for those 65 to 74 years old and another for older seniors. There are no age discounts on housing, nor are there any specials for clothing or medication. And yet, people aged 65 to 74 receive 10% less old age security. Everyone understands that this is unfair. So will the Liberals put an end to this injustice? Or will we get on the bus and hit the election trail? The Honourable Minister of Employment and Seniors. Mr. Speaker, the member for TORIES de Blainville, when she had the opportunity to allow seniors to save hundreds of dollars, seniors who are vulnerable, we're talking about 7,300 vulnerable seniors in her own riding. Well, she voted against that opportunity. It's hypocritical. And now she wants to lecture us about these opportunistic policies. No, we are here for Canadians. We are supporting them, and it's the Bloc. And this is the first question for the member from La Salle et Verdun. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this first opportunity to thank the citizens of La Salle et Verdun for their trust. I will do my utmost to deserve it. Today, I am proud to join the Bloc Québécois ultimatum for seniors. The Liberals have 2 choices. They can improve OAS for those under 74 years of age and under, or they can go to the polls right now. And I am in a good position to remind them that the last time around it didn't end very well for them. So what will they choose, seniors or an election? Order, please. For the second time today, I would ask the member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier, please to not speak when someone else is. The Honourable Minister of Employment and Seniors. Mr. Speaker, I would like to welcome that member to this chamber, and I'd like to reassure him that I heard him very well, even though he was very far from power that as he will be throughout his stay here. But Mr. Speaker, our government spends more on OAS to protect seniors than other previous governments have. And for my colleague, 71 seniors, the seniors receive more thanks to the Liberal government.
Member from Fundy Royal.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. This government is forcing families to pay more for gas, for groceries, for home heating, at a time when they can least afford it. Now the province of New Brunswick is taking the Liberals to court to hold them accountable for the money their carbon tax is making off the backs of everyday Canadians. Will this government listen to Canadians, scrap their carbon tax, or will they finally let Canadians choose in a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps the member opposite can remind the Premier of New Brunswick and some of his members of his own bench that they asked Premier Higgs to go with the federal system because people get more money back, and that's exactly what the Premier did. The Premier of New Brunswick decided to go for the federal system because more people in New Brunswick get more money back than what they pay in carbon pricing, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Fundy Royal.
Mr. Speaker, we know the Liberals would rather talk about anything else than talk about the fact that their 61-cent per litre carbon tax will mean that Canadians will have amongst the highest fuel prices in the world. Even the Parliamentary Budget Officer has confirmed that the Liberals' carbon tax costs Canadians more than they get back. Canadians have no confidence in this Prime Minister or in his costly carbon tax. When will the Liberal government get out of the way so Conservatives can finally axe the tax?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is very clear that the vast majority of Canadian families get more money back than they pay. That has been validated by 300 economists, very much including Trevor Toombs, who they like to quote these days as an
Wilkinson is a one-trick pony, man. There's only one line.
An economic plan for the future will have dire implications for the people who live in Atlantic Canada. These folks oppose the Atlantic Accords, the work that's being done to actually launch an offshore wind and a hydrogen industry to ensure that we are creating good jobs and economic opportunities in Atlantic Canada. They have no plan for climate. They have no plan for the economy.
The Honourable Member from New Brunswick Southwest.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes up, costs up, crime's up, and time's up for this costly coalition's carbon tax scam. 9 premiers are now against the Liberal carbon tax. Today in New Brunswick, Premier Blaine Higgs is challenging this scam in court. Provinces don't get a rebate for heating schools and fueling ambulances. Carbon taxes are not revenue neutral when provinces and municipalities end up paying more for essential services. Right. When will the Green Liberal NDP coalition axe the tax or keep making health care and education more expensive?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, perhaps the member opposite doesn't remember that he himself asked Premier Higgs to go with the federal system so that more people in New Brunswick would get more money back than what they pay in carbon pricing. Perhaps he forgot that he made himself that request to his Premier, Mr. Speaker.
Wow.
The Honourable Member for Lac Saint Louis. Mr. Speaker, in Quebec and across Canada, we are facing a housing crisis that is affecting the lives of people across the country. We need to build more housing and quicker to give Quebecers and Canadians access to housing that meets their needs and is affordable. Can the Minister of Public Works explain to the citizens of my riding of Lac Saint Louis how our government will enable the creation of affordable housing across the country. The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. 6 housing units.
Duclos is a creep. What a weird way.
Well, and
just so freaking weird.
Now they're saying that it was a type of communism to build affordable housing on federal funding, including for seniors. Communism. The good news that we've just built 250,000 housing units. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi. Mr. Speaker, forestry workers in Quebec in some 30 communities are being affected. It is a catastrophe. Out of 1,400 jobs, at least, are being affected and is affecting Quebec's economy. The Bloc is once again voted to keep the government in place, and this is how we realize that they're disconnected from the reality of our regions. Is the Bloc aware of the extent of the disaster that the minister's decree has had in Quebec? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to remind my colleague that we put $500 million of potential investment on the table in Quebec and the regions and the forestry workers and for workers in that sector. And we're only waiting for the Quebec government to sit down at the table with us to discuss things. We want to find a solution, but the Conservatives don't want to do anything for the economy or jobs. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, the Quebec Minister of the Environment is in Ottawa today, and he doesn't understand anything, as do all Quebecers, because our workers are now out of jobs. He wants Quebec to be able to take action in its jurisdiction. The Bloc says it defends Quebec's jurisdiction, but it's very visible on this file. Can the government finally understand that this decree is a catastrophe we could have foreseen? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to remind once again my colleague that at the end of 2022, we signed a joint letter with the federal government, well, between the federal government and the Quebec government, asking Quebec to present a plan for the reestablishment of the woodland caribou. But now it's 2024 and we're still waiting for this plan. All we're asking is for Quebec to do what it committed to do, and we're ready to work with them to find solutions. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, like the Prime Minister, the Bloc leader likes to entertain us with imaginary tales to try to justify his relevance in Ottawa. He sells himself as the hero who puts the brakes on the moratorium on logging in Abitibi, Côte-Nord, and Lac-Saint-Jean regions. But the reality is that Quebec's Minister of the Environment, Benoit Charette, is that the Liberal Prime Minister and his Minister of the Environment literally want to shut down this economic engine of Quebec's regions without even visiting them. Once again, will Canada's Environment Minister put a definitive stop to this radical decree? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, experts, ecologists, forestry workers, and First Nations all say that the future of the forestry industry in Quebec and in our country depends on the health of our forests and also on the health of the caribou. You can't have one without the other. The only people who don't understand that here is the Conservative Party.
The Honourable Member from St. John's East.
Mr. Speaker, today is National Seniors Day, a day to celebrate and thank seniors across the country. Our government knows the importance of promoting the health and well-being of seniors, and that is why we make investments towards programs and services for them. Can the Minister of Health update Canadians on what we are doing to protect and support the health of seniors across this country?
Good question. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you so much, Miss Sheila. You're amazing. Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much. Welcome new members. We'll get back to Mark Holland being a clown. Thank you, Sheila.
Jurisdiction in the country on aging with dignity, helping seniors to age at home and improve our long-term care facilities. And critically, Mr. Speaker, those agreements include for the first time common indicators so we can see that progress in data and see how provinces are doing. Obviously, the work to ensure hundreds of thousands of seniors get dental care, as well as what we're doing in pharmacare, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Courtenay, Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, the Nuu-Chah-Nulth Tribal Council has declared a state of emergency in every single one of their 14 nations territories. The lack of mental health support, treatment, recovery, and harm reduction services is causing irreparable harm. This Liberal government has failed to deliver the urgently needed supports, and young and older people are paying the price. Indigenous people continue to die at a higher rate than non-Indigenous people. This isn't reconciliation. Action is needed now. When will the Liberals stop with the empty words and deliver the urgent funding that the Nuu-Chah-Nulth people need to save lives?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, that's exactly the path that our government has been on, working hand in hand with First Nations and with Indigenous leaders to ensure that programs and services that are delivered by First Nations and Indigenous people are available to their members so that people can heal from the trauma of colonization, Mr. Speaker, something that just yesterday our government stood up with many survivors across the country to acknowledge. This has deep impacts on communities, and we'll continue this hard work together.
The honourable member from Churchill, Kiwatanaski.
Mr. Speaker, Liberals spent yesterday professing support for First Nations, the same First Nations the government is currently fighting in court over something as basic as clean drinking water. Canada's lawyers are saying that, quote, Canada doesn't owe any legal obligations or duties to operate First Nations water systems. They even say that when ministers make promises, it's just, quote, context specific and can be ignored. This is the Liberal approach to reconciliation. Promise clean drinking water to First Nations and then direct your lawyers to fight First Nations in court on clean drinking water. Will the Liberals cut the hypocrisy, stop fighting Shamattawa and other First Nations in court, and deliver clean drinking water once and for all?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, it's really heartening to hear the Member of Parliament from the NDP speak so eloquently about the need to move quicker and faster on alleviating long-term boil water advisories across this country. In fact, since we've taken office, we've lifted over 145 long-term boil water advisories, prevented well over 200, Mr. Speaker, and we're going to continue that hard work. I assume from her comments that means she's going to support this new legislation and ensure it has safe passage through the House.
I'd like to thank honourable members for carrying themselves out largely without issue today. It being the honourable member from Kamloops Thompson Caribou is rising on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had a member statement under Standing Order 31 today. That statement had to be delivered twice, and it was to salute two veterans, one who's 101 and one who's 104 in my riding. And both times there was quite a bit of noise in the chamber for what I'd hoped to be a very solemn salute to these two living veterans who lived through D-Day. I would just bring this to the chair's attention in hopes that, especially when people are giving heartfelt member statements like this one to our veterans, that there could be a bit more quiet. Thank you.
All right, gang, so what we're going to do now, that's the end of question period. If there's points of order, question period's over because there are no points of order during a question period. So that wraps up that part of it. But we were watching this very interesting committee video, and I wouldn't mind showing a little bit more of it just because it's an interesting piece. And we can find that on here now. And we'll get that up and rolling. Whoa. We're going right back to our girl, Smelly Cat, and here we go with it.
Of looking into this study coming from Conservatives or any
I could honestly feel a shift and a difference in the narrative around the public perception with the invasion in Ukraine. I remember early days attending vigils in my community in Uxbridge with a large Ukrainian population as an example, and how quickly on social media that support for Ukraine started to erode. Even in our first debates of the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, it was pretty non-eventful. There seemed to be all-party support. And then you start to see things shift. And a large part of that was changes in narrative online, on social media accounts. And so when this came forward in regards to influencers being potentially and allegedly paid by Russia to look and mimic like Canadian organizations or Canadian social media pages, you start to put two and two together, as I could very clearly see that shift as just a local MP with Ukrainians in my riding as one example. But overall, hearing people start to defend Russia or seeing Russian flags on the Hill and protests to anything, really. So my first question is, and I'll like both of your perspectives on this, do you really believe that influencer accounts that were being funded or allegedly being funded by Russia, do you really believe that they didn't know who was paying, or is there a world in which people wouldn't know that Russia is sending propaganda? And the comment about if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, and if you're repeating Russian propaganda and then to claim you had no idea you were being paid by or repeating Russian propaganda. Have you seen other examples where, this claim that they had no idea who was footing the bill? So maybe I'll start here, if you don't mind.
Thank you. I would say that even though these right now are still allegations, personally, even the cursory research would show that these perspectives are coming from the Russian government. Many times they're, if not word for word, their idea for idea, the idea is coming from the Kremlin, propagated in Russian government propaganda channels. And just addressing something said earlier, I agree with Mrs. Shichi that RCDA is dissatisfied with the Canadian government response to the disinformation that we have seen permeating Canadian social media, but also in regards to enforcement of the measures that have been enacted, including sanctions. We have questions as to how these sanctions are enforced, why violations of sanctions seem to be, these investigations seem to be coming from the United States, not from within Canada. Even if a lot of the disinformation seems to be happening in the United States, due to the interconnectedness of the Canadian and American ecosystems, narratives that originate there, permeate, eventually end up in Canada and affect the national discourse here.
If I may add, just as to your prior comments about the changing narrative among your constituents, this is actually something that's increasingly backed by data. There are some interesting analysis, including from Marcus Kolga, that shows that there are more and more Canadians that are exposed to the Kremlin narrative online, and that these narratives are having an impact on how Canadians think about the Ukraine war, for instance. And this is not only a Ukraine war issue, it's also an issue that targets broader issues in Canadian politics, such as the housing crisis, the inflation, and even the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. That has been something that the Kremlin has done in Canada for close to a decade, as my friend alluded to in his testimony.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I am just limited on time, and I'd like to get, but just, do you think it's also problematic when politicians are being paid to fly to, around the world by institutions like the Danube Institute, who has been known to also promote anti-Ukraine and more so Kremlin propaganda? Do you think it's problematic if Canadian politicians are also being paid for institutes that share that? And maybe I'll start here since I know I'm limited on time.
Absolutely, because there is
the possibility and the appearance of bias, and so I think that all trips paid by other entities should be banned for Canadian politicians. But I beg to differ with my friend. I believe that there was a Canadian social media influencer who was working for Tenet, Lauren Southern, and she did produce videos on immigration crime, anti-white sentiment, anti-LGBTQ plus paranoia, residential school unmarked graves, inflation, the housing crisis. Canada is on the brink of chaos. And of course, Canada is becoming a communist hellhole under Justin Trudeau. So these are not just American-directed narratives. Canada was directly targeted.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up quickly.
Yeah. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. On y va maintenant, Monsieur Fortin. Monsieur.
All right, gang, we're going to wrap it up right there. We just wanted to show a little bit of, you know, that foolish woman. Like, Lord. What an interesting show. A lot of Freeland today. Way too much Greg Fergus. Fergus is a huge issue, guys. There's no doubt about that. Anyway, we're going to get going. That's it. Aaron, like, subscribe, share, get notified. Love the comments. Please leave a comment. Please share this with somebody. We're trying to get the word out about Canadian federal politics. We kind of start with the question period and learn from there. That is it. I appreciate everybody in the chat room. Welcome to all the new members, all the new viewers, everybody that's been watching. Please come back. We're back same time, same place tomorrow. That is it. We're going to, what are we going to send us off on this show? How about this? This is a fun one to watch. It just is. So, all right, gang, we're out for now. Same time, same place tomorrow. Have a great day. We'll catch you. Looking forward to tomorrow's show. Wacky Wednesday, man. We'll see what's going on. Ciao for now.